Critical problems and their compassionate solutions. The law of karma. Most Westerners misunderstand the law of karma. They mistake it for fatalism, where one is doomed to suffer for some unknown crime in a forgotten past life. This is not quite so, as this story will show. Two women were each baking a cake. The first woman had miserable ingredients. The old white flour had to have the green mouldy bits removed first. The cholesterol-enriched butter was almost going rancid. She had to pick the brown lumps out of the white sugar, because someone had put in a spoon wet with coffee, and the only fruit she had were ancient sultanas, as hard as depleted uranium, and her kitchen was of the style called pre-World War, which World War was a matter of debate. The second woman had the very best of ingredients. The organically grown whole wheat flour was guaranteed GM-free. She had cholesterol-free margarine, raw sugar and succulent fruit grown in her own garden, and her kitchen was state-of-the-art with every modern gadget. Which woman baked the more delicious cake? It is often not the person with the best ingredients who bakes the better cake. There is more to baking a cake than just the ingredients. Sometimes the person with miserable ingredients puts so much effort, care and love into their baking that their cake comes out the most delicious of all. It is what we do with the ingredients that counts. I have some friends who have had miserable ingredients to work with in this life. They were born into poverty, possibly abused as children, not clever at school, maybe disabled and unable to play sport. But the few qualities they did have, they put together so well that they baked a mightily impressive cake. I admire them greatly. Do you recognize such people? I have other friends who have had wonderful ingredients to work with in this life. Their families were wealthy and loving, they were intelligent at school, talented at sport, good-looking and popular, and yet they wasted their young lives with drugs or alcohol. Do you recognize such a one? Half of karma is the ingredients we have to work with, and the other half, the most crucial part, is what we make of them in this life. Drinking tea when there's no way out. There is always something we can do with the ingredients of our day, even if that something is just sitting down enjoying our last cup of tea. The following story was told to me by a fellow schoolteacher who had served in the British Army in World War II. He was on patrol in the jungles of Burma. He was young, far from home, and very frightened. The scout from his patrol returned to tell the captain the terrible news. Their small patrol had stumbled into a huge number of Japanese troops. The patrol was vastly outnumbered and completely surrounded. The young British soldier prepared himself to die. He expected his captain to order the men to fight their way out. That was the manly thing to do. Maybe someone would make it. If not, well, they would take some of the enemy with them into death. That's what soldiers did. But not the soldier who was the captain. He ordered his men to stay put, sit down, and make a cup of tea. It was the British Army, after all. The young soldier thought his commanding officer had gone mad. How can anyone think of a cup of tea when surrounded by the enemy with no way out and about to die? In an army, especially at war, orders had to be obeyed. They all made what they thought was to be their last cup of tea. Before they had finished drinking their tea, the scout came back and whispered to his captain. The captain asked for the men's attention. "The enemy has moved," he announced. "There is now a way out. Pack your kit quickly and quietly. Let's go." They all got out safely, which is why he could tell me the story many years later. He told me that he owed his life to the wisdom of that captain, not just at war in Burma, but many times since. Several times in his life, it was as if he was surrounded by the enemy, completely outnumbered, with no way out and about to die. He meant by the enemy serious illness, horrendous difficulty and tragedy, in the middle of which there seemed no way out. Without the experience in Burma, he would have tried to fight his way through the problem, and no doubt made it much worse. But instead, when death or deadly trouble surrounded him on all sides, he simply sat down and made a cup of tea. The world is always changing. Life is a flux. He drank his tea, conserved his powers, and waited for the time, which always came, when he could do something effective, like escape. For those who don't like tea, remember this saying: when there's nothing to do, then do nothing. It may seem obvious, but it may also save your life. Going with the flow. A wise monk whom I have known for many years was hiking with an old friend in an Antipodean wilderness. Late one hot afternoon they arrived at a splendid stretch of isolated beach. Even though it is against the monk's rules to swim just for fun, the blue water was inviting, and he needed to cool off after the long walk, so he stripped off and went for a swim. When he was a young layman, he had been a strong swimmer, but now, as a monk of long standing, it had been many years since he had last swum. After only a couple of minutes of splashing in the surf, he was caught in a strong riptide that began to sweep him out to sea. He was later told that this was a very dangerous beach because of the fierce currents. At first, the monk tried to swim against the current. He soon realized, though, that the force of the current was too strong for him. His training now came to his aid. He relaxed, let go, and went with the flow. It was an act of great courage to